California's faults just hit their highest stress level in a full 1,000 years. Then a magnitude 7.3 struck off Mexico, and its shockwaves registered under the western United States. But the scariest part of the story isn't what moved, it's what has gone completely silent. The San Francisco Bay Area has recorded almost no seismic activity in the past 7 days. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that silence should worry you far more than the shaking. Drop a comment with your city. We want to know who's watching this one right now. On July 17th, 2026, a magnitude 7.3 ruptured off Mexico's southern coast near the Guatemala border. The USGS confirmed it struck along the Middle America Trench at a depth of just 18.6 miles. That's shallow and in earthquake science. Shallow means the energy has far less rock to absorb it. 7 earthquakes above magnitude 7.0 have struck within 155 miles of the same epicenter since 1950. This fault is not a quiet one. It is one of the most productive earthquake factories on the planet. Within 30 minutes, the largest aftershock struck a magnitude 6.0, followed by multiple magnitude 5s. This is textbook aftershock behavior, the signature of a fault settling into a new equilibrium. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued an alert, then canceled it after wave gauges confirmed minor impact. Waves reached only about half a foot above normal tide or ripple, not the disaster it could have been. Drop a comment with your city. We want to know who's watching this one right now. Now here's where this story gets much bigger than a single earthquake off Mexico's southern coast. To understand why, y'all need to know what this fault has already proven it can do. In September 2017, a magnitude 8.2 struck this same zone, Mexico's largest earthquake in a century. That single event killed 98 people and generated a tsunami visible across the Pacific. A magnitude 8.2 releases roughly 30 times more energy than the 7.3 we just watched rupture. This week's earthquake is not the ceiling here, it's a reminder of a ceiling that sits far higher. Here's the plate geometry that makes this region so dangerous for the entire Western Hemisphere. The Cocos Plate dives beneath the North American Plate at roughly 76 millimeters per year. That's about the pace your fingernails grow but carried out by an ocean floor the size of a small sea. In some segments of this arc, the plates collide even faster, closer to 88 millimeters per year. That motion doesn't happen smoothly, the plates catch and grip. Stress builds decade after decade, until the friction finally loses, and the overriding plate lurches upward in a single violent instant. That lurch is the earthquake, releasing in seconds what took an entire human lifetime to accumulate. This is the same category of fault that produced Chile's 9.5 and Japan's catastrophic 2011 event. We covered Chile's megaquake in our last video. This Mexico event is connected to that same story. Now let's talk about what happened less than a month before Mexico, because the timing matters enormously. On June 24th, Venezuela was hit by a 7.2 and 7.5 doublet 39 seconds apart. Less than 23 days later, a 7.3 struck at the other key junction of the Caribbean plate boundary. Venezuela ruptured a right lateral transform boundary. Mexico struck a reverse thrust at the same plate. One big shift at a key junction typically produces corresponding movement at the next junction down the line. Scientists tracking Caribbean plate stress call this pattern a dominoes effect across interconnected boundaries. And here's what makes the timing even more significant. Seismologists weren't surprised this happened. The 2017 magnitude 8.2 in Mexico was followed 2 years later by California's Ridgecrest 7.1 earthquake. History doesn't repeat. But it rhymes, and right now it's rhyming harder than it has in decades. Now let's talk about California, because this is where the story gets genuinely alarming. A major study in the Journal of Geophysical Research reconstructed 1,000 years of fault stress. Their finding is stark segments of the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults are now at their highest stress. Not the highest in a decade, not the highest since the last big one, the highest in 1,000 years. The San Bernardino segment of the San Jacinto fault is carrying a load of roughly 3.6 megapascals right now. That number is higher than at any point in the past 1,000 years of the entire reconstruction. Researchers identified a junction called Cajon Pass, what they're calling an earthquake gate. If that gate is open when a rupture arrives, a joint failure could reach magnitude 7.4 to 7.8. That range would strike a far larger area than any single fault event, including the Los Angeles basin directly. Millions of people live directly on top of this hazard, and most have never experienced a major rupture. The southern San Andreas last produced a great earthquake in 1857, the Fort Tejon event, magnitude 7.9. That means this segment has been storing strain for roughly 169 years longer than its average rupture gap. The plate boundary keeps moving a few centimeters every year, whether the fault slips or not. Every year of silence is another year of strain locked silently into the rock beneath Los Angeles. Are you watching from California, the Bay Area, or anywhere along the West Coast right now? Tell us in the comments, does any of this describe the ground beneath where you live? Now here's the part of this story that scientists find more unsettling than any single earthquake. While Southern California's faults sit at record stress, the San Francisco Bay Area has gone eerily quiet over the past 7 days. Only a couple of tiny magnitude 1 tremors registered anywhere near the bay. The Bay Area fault system is supposed to be constantly creeping and releasing small earthquakes regularly. This kind of quiet has a name in seismology, a seismic gap, and it is not a sign of safety. A seismic gap can be the signature of a locked segment silently accumulating strain for a future release. Look at the geography, and the picture gets even more pointed for anyone living in the Bay Area. There is seismic activity north of the bay, and activity south, but in between there's a dead zone. That gap halts right around the Santa Cruz Mountain segment of the San Andreas Fault. That is the exact same segment that ruptured in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake magnitude 6.9. That quake killed dozens, collapsed a freeway, and stopped a World Series in the middle of play. The northern San Andreas above it last ruptured in the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake, magnitude 7.9. That disaster happened 120 years ago and effectively rewrote how the world thinks about earthquake risk. A fault goes quiet, pressure builds invisibly, and then releases everything stored at once. Now here's what the Mexico earthquake actually means, and what it does not mean for California. Can a 7.3 off Mexico directly trigger the San Andreas from over 1,000 miles away? The honest scientific answer is no, and understanding why matters more than the fear itself. Static stress transfer falls off ferociously fast. With distance it matters within tens of kilometers, not thousands. At the range from Mexico to California, that effect is effectively zero, no domino chain exists. But dynamic triggering the passing shudder of seismic waves is real, documented, and different. The Mexico 7.3's P wave physically raced through the planet and registered on seismographs in the western United States. About an hour after the rupture, instruments in the Yellowstone region recorded a clean, unmistakable arrival. The same seismographs that felt Mexico's earthquake are the ones trained day and night on California's faults. Dynamic triggering can jostle a fault already sitting at the very edge. It cannot manufacture one from nothing. The Mexico earthquake is not a trigger for the San Andreas. It is a spotlight on what already exists. It arrived at the exact moment California's faults were independently measured at their 1,000-year peak. That measurement, not the rupture off Mexico, is what should hold your full attention right now. Or halfway through, are you watching from California, Oregon, Washington, or anywhere seismically active? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one, and it helps us plan our next deep dive. Now, let's talk about the Garlock Fault, the one piece of California's picture most people have never heard of. On June 24th, hours before Venezuela's doublet, a magnitude 5.6 struck near Willits in Northern California. That location had never recorded an earthquake that large in California's entire modern seismic history. It occurred right at the bend where the San Andreas turns, a known strain accumulation point for decades. Then the Garlock Fault, which runs east from the San Andreas through the Mojave, started moving too. A 4.1 and 4.3 struck at the fault junction the very day after Venezuela's doublet struck. The Garlock Fault hasn't had a major rupture in hundreds of years and is considered deeply overdue. The 2019 Ridgecrest 7.1 loaded enormous stress directly onto the Garlock that energy has not released yet. Seismologists describe the Garlock right now as one of the most dangerous loaded faults in the western United States. If the Garlock ruptures, it directly intersects with the San Andreas and could trigger a chain reaction scenario. Scientists call this a simultaneous rupture scenario, where one fault failure cascades into another within minutes. There's even emerging research suggesting that a San Andreas rupture could trigger Cascadia or the reverse. These are low probability scenarios, but the physics allows them, and the stress loading right now makes them worth watching. There's also the 1952 Kern County magnitude 7.5 was California's last great earthquake above that threshold. That same year, a magnitude 9.0 struck Kamchatka, eerily matching last year's 8.8 Kamchatka event. In 2025, Kamchatka produced an 8.8, and California has produced nothing above magnitude 7.1 since 2019. History is rhyming again across both data points, and researchers are taking the pattern seriously. New Madrid under the Mississippi is also on the watch list, and its connection to Venezuela is documented. The last time New Madrid had a catastrophic sequence was 1811 to 1812, the same year Venezuela ruptured. We covered that full historical link in our Venezuela doublet video. The pattern is not a coincidence. Seismologists also have Utah's Wasatch Fault on elevated watch. It hasn't had a major event in centuries. Salt Lake City sits directly on the Wasatch and has never experienced anything close to the fault's potential. And then there's Seattle and Portland, sitting above the Cascadia subduction zone, which last ruptured in 1700. Cascadia can produce a magnitude 9+ megaquake, the kind that generates tsunamis within minutes of rupture. The Pacific Northwest coast, from Northern California to British Columbia, sits downslope of active volcanic chains, too. Let's get practical now, because none of this geological picture should leave you paralyzed, just prepared. The first and most important thing anyone on an active fault zone can do is download an earthquake alert app. MyShake gives 5 to 15 seconds of warning before shaking arrives. That window is enough to save your life. 5 to 15 seconds sounds small, but it's enough to get under cover and protect your head and neck. The moment shaking starts, drop to your knees, get under something sturdy, and hold on until it fully stops. If you're outdoors when it hits, move away from buildings, utility poles, and anything that could fall directly on you. The biggest killer in a city earthquake isn't the ground shaking, it's debris falling from above your head. For Bay Area and Southern California folks, if your go bag isn't packed and ready. Today is genuinely that day. A go bag, minimum 3 days of water, food rations, a first aid kit, flashlight, medications, and a battery radio. A hand crank emergency radio might be the single most underrated item you can add to that bag right now. With cell towers down and power out, that radio is your only real connection to what's happening outside. Always keep slip-on shoes near your bed. Post-earthquake floors are covered in broken glass everywhere you step. Keep a written emergency contact list in a physical location. Your phone battery will die at the worst moment. Before any earthquake strikes, agree on a family meeting spot, somewhere everyone can find without phone service. Watching from the Pacific coast, download a tsunami alert app and know your nearest evacuation route today. If you're on the coast and feel strong shaking, don't wait for an official alert, head to higher ground immediately. Natural warning signs include the ocean pulling back dramatically far below the normal low tide line. That's your signal. Now let's look at what countries that got this right can teach every city in the American West. Japan built a mandatory nationwide early warning system that delivers alerts seconds before the strongest shaking arrives. Chile turned the 1960 magnitude 9.5 catastrophe into some of the world's strictest seismic building codes. When Chile's magnitude 8.8 struck in 2010, the death toll came in at around 525 people, remarkable for that scale. For comparison, Haiti's magnitude 7.0 the same year killed well over 100,000. The difference was building codes. California has improved significantly since 1906, but millions still live and work in unreinforced older buildings. San Francisco has made progress on retrofitting, but engineers say the job is far from finished across the Bay Area. Los Angeles has one of the largest retrofit programs in the nation, but thousands of buildings remain unaddressed. The lesson from Venezuela, from Chile, from Japan is always the same. It's rarely the earthquake that kills people. It's the buildings those people were inside, built without proper reinforcement, waiting for the wrong moment. The California Office of Emergency Services does maintain earthquake early warnings for the entire state network today. Shake Alert is active across California, Oregon, and Washington, but you have to opt in to receive the alerts. Check your phone's wireless emergency alert settings today and make sure earthquake alerts are turned on and active. Now let's step back and look at the full picture that this week's events are showing us about our planet right now. Venezuela's doublet struck June 24th. Mexico's 7.3 struck July 17th. The gap between them was 23 days. In between, a magnitude 6.1 struck the Gulf of Mexico, the largest ever recorded in that body of water. A 6.0 popped off in the Gulf of California on June 30th, forming a chain of energy moving northward. The Caribbean and Cocos Plates, which link North America and South America together, are both now highly active. Scientists tracking this pattern say the seismic energy progression is moving toward the North American fault system. A fault doesn't care about the calendar. It releases when accumulated stress finally overcomes the friction holding it shut. Whether that tipping point arrives tomorrow or in 10 years or in 50 is something physics cannot tell us. That is why seismologists speak in probabilities and never in dates, and why preparedness is the only answer. The San Andreas strain is at a 1,000-year high. The Garlock is loaded. The Bay Area has gone quiet. Mexico's 7.3 didn't create any of these conditions. It's simply shone a spotlight on what was already there. Earthquakes don't invent the danger. They expose the danger that was already sitting quietly beneath the surface. Have you ever felt real earthquake shaking, and what city were you in when the ground moved beneath you? We read every comment. Which fault zones or cities do you want us to break down in our next deep dive? Your location matters. Knowing where y'all are watching helps us bring you the most relevant coverage possible. For the people of Mexico and Guatemala feeling those aftershocks today. This isn't an abstract geological story. Landslides triggered by the 7.3 have been reported across the Chiapas region, adding danger on top of shaking. Aftershocks above magnitude 5.0 are still expected, and every aftershock carries risk for already damaged structures. Authorities have urged residents near the epicenter to stay out of any building showing visible structural damage. The good news is that Mexico's 8.2 experience in 2017 left this region with better emergency response protocols. Mexico City received light shaking from this event, but the city's ancient lakebed soil remains a serious risk. In 1985, An 8.1 centered hundreds of miles away shook Mexico City for over 2 straight terrifying minutes. In 2017, a 7.1 collapsed hundreds of buildings across Mexico City and took more than 300 lives in hours. Mexico City folks, make sure your Earthquake Alert app is active and your emergency plan is current today. What this week has shown us is that we are living through elevated activity across the entire Western Hemisphere right now. Venezuela's doublet, Mexico's 7.3, the Gulf earthquakes. These are connected pieces of one much larger story. Every fault zone we've covered, San Andreas, Garlock, Cascadia, Hayward, New Madrid, is under close watch. The science cannot tell us when, but it tells us clearly that now is the time to be genuinely prepared. If this opened your eyes to where things stand, share it with someone living on or near an active fault zone. The ground under the western United States is at its most stressed state in 1,000 years of recorded history. A 7.3 in Mexico just reminded a network of scientists staring at California's fault lines exactly what's at stake. Pack that bag, turn on those alerts, make a plan with your family before any of this becomes personal to you. Stay alert, stay informed, stay prepared, because California's faults don't give advance notice when they finally move.